This video will contain spoilers for the Devil May Cry series.
I'd like now to introduce a very special guest from Capcom. Capcom is a company best known for blockbuster franchises like Resident Evil and Mega Man, and also Dino Crisis more recently. I'd like to introduce Shinji Mikami, who is the creator, the man responsible for Resident Evil, the whole series, and also to talk about his upcoming franchise, Devil May Cry.
いろいろ説明する前に映像を見ていただいた方が、いいと思うんで、まず映像の方、ロードビデオ。
Before I go into the details, I'd like to show the video.
Block off, Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way.
If you've been hanging around the interwebs lately, specifically the single-player gaming sphere, you most likely ran across these characters. These hunters definitely have made their impact and are getting the recognition they deserve. The point is, all this newfound appreciation within these last few years from newer DMC players definitely had me look back to where this all started. A game worth remembering. Devil May Cry 2001 for the PlayStation 2. For the longest time, it felt like DMC was kind of a niche series. I'm not saying it was underground or anything like that. I mean, they sold well enough and had 3 whole installments that were received mostly positively before the reboot attempt in 2013 that Capcom abandoned. But at the same time, it felt like you really had to be in the gaming sphere, specifically the character action gaming sphere, to know about DMC, which some people argue wasn't really a thing until the turn of the millennia, 2001, like I said earlier, especially back before the internet was what it is today, where you couldn't just post a meme or a gaming clip and potentially thousands, if not millions of people could see it. But before we get started, let's get some context about my history with the series, as well as the series itself, The Hunter, and I. My story is pretty simple. You see, when I first properly learned about the series, it was by the point everything was already out. Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition was being promoted as one of the few noteworthy games to buy PS5 for. You see, I was first exposed to DMC through Devil Trigger, just appearing on my recommendations for music. Now, what initially grabbed my attention about this video is that it was a lyrical song that was lengthy from a recent video game. At the time, I felt like vocal tracks, whether it be songs made with the game in mind or licensed stuff, were fizzled out. Basically, a product of its time, to an extent. Product of its time. Mostly the 2000s. But no, apparently a game from 2019, 2020 had several vocal songs. And they were combat themes, meaning you get to hear these songs pretty regularly during the core gameplay stuff. So I listened to the song and thought, well, let's check out this Devil May Cry series. And every single other trailer or song I saw just kept on giving. And eventually, I managed to figure out what I need to know in order to play these games, such as the PS4 HD collection being a thing and learning about the special editions and reboot stuff. By the way, that's the version of the game I'll be looking at in this video. The Devil May Cry 1 PS4 port from the 2018 HD collection. Anyways, to be more specific about what got me into this game was its unapologetic style and sincerity, despite the fact that it may not seem the kind of game to focus on something like that. To focus on something like sincerity. As well as the gameplay, where the game encourages variety and thinking through the style ranking. Well, at least as opposed to in the first game. More on that later. It felt like this game really was giving the keys to another unique side of gaming. And for clarity, I'm not just talking about the first game. I'm talking about trailers of the series in general. Devil May Cry 3, 4, 5, hell, even before I learned that the reboot was a full-on reboot attempt, I thought it looked cool. I honestly had no idea if it was like a spin-off or something. I had no idea it was trying to replace the mainline series at the time. The point is, the series seemed like a form of expression I wish other people could check out for themselves. For context, I wasn't keeping up with gaming much at this point in my life. The last time I really did was during the 3DS days, because that was the only console I had at the time. So what did I do in the meantime for fun? Well, mostly watching animation and illustrating, which is where my love for these mediums really bloomed, and video games came back into the mix of my life through a PlayStation. My first home console I could call my own, and one of the first games to kick it off was the Devil May Cry HD collection. I think if memory serves me right, I went into this game blind for the most part. You know, except for the occasional internet search for a collectible. Looking at you, Blue Orbs. Now with that out of the way, let's learn some development background. Okay, so this game is very loosely based on Dante's Inferno. How could you ever tell? I mean, they just look so alike, hence the characters' names. I'm pretty sure this is common knowledge for Devil May Cry fans, and probably Capcom fans in general, like Resident Evil fans. But this game started out as an RE4 prototype, and yes, I know Devil May Cry fans, you heard the story over and over again. The game's director was Hideki Kamiya. He also worked on the change of narrative after it was no longer an RE4 prototype. Alongside him was scenario writer Noboru Sugimura, according to a 2011 Game Watch article reported by Minoru Funatsu, archived by web.archive.org/the Internet Wayback Machine. Side note, this article was in Japanese, so it had to use online translator to verify this info from Wikipedia. As for the gameplay, it was developed by Team Little Devils, which is a group made up of staff members from Capcom Production Studio 4. According to an Archive 1UP interview from 2008, archived by archive.ph or archive.today. The whole game was built from the ground up with Dante's combat and acrobatic moveset in mind. According to a GameSpot article from May 24, 2001 by Yukiyoshi Ikesato, the choice to make the game mission-based was decided late into development. And I can tell. This report was comparing it to a demo that came with Code Veronica in March 2001. The game itself dropped in August 2001 in Japan first, so for all we know, they probably made this choice with only a few good months left. Also, the director claims that DMC is supposed to be difficult to challenge those who play more casual games at that point. Old, inaccessible 1UP article that was archived by archive.ph/archive.today. Oh, and games like Strider had an influence on Devil May Cry with his boss rush, according to issue 78 of Retro Gamer, archived by issue.com. According to an Electronic Gaming Monthly issue from December 2001, archived by archive.org, the way they made the architecture look the way it did, quote, Kamiya sent members of the DMC team to Barcelona, Spain, to study the works of 19th century Spanish architect Antoni Gaudi. Kamiya stated, quote, I wanted to make the castle a creepy one, so people could relate it to the demon world. I thought it would be helpful for our artists to see Gaudi's works since he adopted curved lines. His works gives you the impression that they are some sort of organic matter and are about to move. End quote. That's pretty dope. Now, on to the game's premise. Okay, so we open up with the cutscene with Sparta in the background doing some sick kicks, giving background knowledge of the world that we find ourselves in. World building basically. After that, Trish pulls up looking for Dante and wants him to hear him out. After that, a woman pulls up looking for our protagonist, Dante, and wants him to hear her out for a mission. Dante asks her, what's the dealio, girlio? And Trish tells him the dealio.
So, you must be the handyman who'll take any dirty job.
Well, the way I figure it, in this business a lot of your kind comes around. And if I kill each one that comes, eventually I should hit the jackpot sooner or later.
In that case, you should be used to this sort of thing.
Sword. Time to go to work, guys.
Even as a monarch, I had child hours. There's blood in me.
It seems that way, but I'm not your enemy. My name is Trish. I came here to seek your help, to put an end to the underworld.
What?
So we hop over to Malay Island and the story slows down big time. We don't really get any of the juicy stuff till later, you know, when the truth about Trish is revealed and Dante finds out about Nilo Angelo and after defeating him. Yet despite that, between these missions, they definitely have their cool characterization moments that make Dante and the game stand out, especially at the time. Why, their style, of course, which is a good opportunity to talk about Dante's characterization. See, with Dante in this specific iteration, compared to what comes after, comes out the more subtle kind of cool. Suave, if you will. He's not as loud and as bashful as his post-DMC2 self. His humor here is pretty straightforward,
Block off, Featherface.
which could convey that Dante loves to have his fun, but ultimately has a job to do. Which is kind of funny because apparently, according to that same EGM issue I mentioned earlier, one of Dante's inspiration was Joseph Joestar, who is kind of the most out there Joestar. Anyways, back to Dante. I feel like his specific version is cool, conveyed well with the Alistair scene. You know, when he gets stabbed and does his cool swings. It first starts being played off as something ominous and off-putting before he does his swings. And then equips the sword, which comes after a cool transition, telling the player how the weapon is Dante. Compare this to Dante from Devil May Cry 3 getting his first weapon that isn't his default sword. Sure, if we're looking at the first 3 games, we could justify the character change since 3 is a prequel by several years. I think it was by 10? I don't know, I could be wrong. But despite that, he never acts like DMC1 Dante again in 4 or 5. Which takes place chronologically after 3. Some people like to chalk this up that to Dante lighting up again is because he found Nero, which is basically him learning that he still does have some family like him around, and he isn't as known as he thought he was. But let's not beat around the bush. The reason for the character change was because of behind the scenes changes. Hideki Itsuno taking over as director of the series. It's clear that Hideki Itsuno wants that kind of Dante, but like going back and playing DMC1, I can't help but kind of miss the more mellowed out Dante. Not saying that post DMC2 Dante is anything bad, far from it, but rather I think one of DMC1's unique attributes is when it could linger on a quiet Dante by himself for a second before going back into business. Despite the fact that I yet to watch it, I hear that the 2007 anime has Dante down at the emotional dumps, and people seem to resonate with it, or at least like the idea of it. I hope this displays how having a more mellowed out Dante who finds himself in the field sometimes could work with the post-DMC1 Dante. I'm not saying that Dante has to be sad every other moment when he's not fighting, but lingering on a Dante who's having a moment could be nice and serviceable for his character. This isn't to say that Dante doesn't have his fair share of death from DMC3 and onwards, but some more couldn't hurt, right? This isn't to say that DMC1 Dante is any crazy, especially when it compared to the execution of Dante's characters in Devil May Cry 3. I still think out of the two, Devil May Cry 3 and afterwards Dante is the better overall character. He just has more death, and the execution of said death is good. It's solid for the most part. To be frank, the Hideki Itsuno version of Dante is why I give a damn about Dante the way I do, and view Devil May Cry 1 Dante in a new light. Now anyways, let's get back to that job that we were talking about. Now, the combat in Devil May Cry 1 is pretty simple and clean at times. You can't switch back and forth between weapons in the blink of an eye like the later games. You do so by either going to the main menu during gameplay or press the left control stick, and then it takes a few seconds transitioning between weapons. And the two main melee weapons you have are Alistair, a sword, or a hand-to-hand combat weapon, Ifrit. Yet, you have 5 guns and you are most likely going to use the rocket launcher out of all of them the moment you get it. Let's be honest, the Styles rank was introduced from the very beginning of the series. But unlike the later installments where the rank is raised due to things like the variety and execution of the moves, as well as not taking any damage, in this one I hear the sentiment that the style ranking is more like a combo counter. As long as you get a shit ton of hits in quickly, you'll get that S rank. And with combat comes enemies. The more memorable ones in my opinion being Griffin and Nightmare, and Shadow too, who act as more of a mini boss throughout the levels instead of a straight up boss compared to the other two. And honestly, these enemies can get pretty creepy at times. They really do complement the general vibes and aesthetic this item has. But of course, the standout of these fights is Nilo Angelo, the only humanoid boss fight. He really does push the game's mechanics to the test, especially in harder difficulties, or especially if you're a first timer or a casual player. And man, speaking of harder difficulties, Harmo kicked my ass. I think a common feeling is that a lot of people feel that the last few fights really do drag on. Nightmare 3 and the Final Mundus fight can really test one's patience, especially on the first time playthrough. Something else I'd like to bring attention to is the game's items that you can buy at an in-game shop. Whenever you buy an item, the price of that respective item increases. So next time you buy it, it'll cost significantly more than before. I think this is to encourage the players to not rely on items as a crutch and instead focus their efforts on actually learning the game's combat to get through the game. Because with moves, their prices will always be the same and you usually can only buy them once. And how do you drive this message home? By increasing the item's price after every purchase. Speak with your wallet. It makes sense why the item's price isn't that high from the get-go. They give you a bit of a leeway at the beginning, but sooner or later, the game lets you know you gotta start depending on those training wheels. Honestly, I like this idea a lot. This is proven from an Electronic Gaming Monthly issue from December 2001, archived by archive.org. The director stated, quote, "However, the most important thing in DMC is not to power up Dante, nor collect items, but to improve your own skill. Any items/power-ups will not be very effective until you improve your skill and learn to control Dante so he can dance like a butterfly, sting like a bee." End quote. And apparently it resonated with a lot of people too, especially since in Devil May Cry 5, the item shop is just gone. The only thing you could really buy is the blue and purple orbs. Oh, and the gold ones too. Honestly, letting the player know that by playing and engaging with the game works more often than not. And that's when the occasional item might be handy. Unless you're a masochist doing a no item run, things can get really tricky. Although, the last few blue and purple orbs are a pain to get since they get really pricey and are only attainable if you're really dead set on getting them. Also, according to that same source, the air juggle move was inspired by a glitch found in Onimusha Warlords. Well, time to grind by killing some enemies for red orbs. Speaking about these enemies, let's talk about their environment they're in. This whole setting, my goodness, the vibes are immaculate. I feel like a lot of people can agree about that with Devil May Cry 1. A lot of people lament that vibe no longer being around since it's not as persistent after the PS2 games. I feel like DMC 1 may be the best invoking that vibe, and it might have to do with the fact that this was a prototype RE4 at one point. Also, this game is a linear kind of game. Now, that's all fine and dandy until you realize you can't go back to certain missions. Even though this game has been re-released several times, they hadn't implemented a proper mission select option. This is an unfortunate flaw for the game considering that certain secret missions only spawn in certain missions, meaning that if you miss it because you couldn't find it, well, tough luck. You're not going to be able to go back unless you're willing to do a new Game Plus playthrough. But you have to play the whole game all over again just for those few collectibles. Again, what makes this thing even more is that this game was re-released more than once. Nothing was ever done about that. Were they not aware, or they just couldn't for one reason or another? Oh, and you ever do plan to do that do-over for the collectibles on a harder difficulty, like I did? The secret missions difficulty will also increase alongside the main game. I had to learn that the hard way when I decided to do a new game plus on hard mode after beating it for the first time on normal in order to get rest of the blue orbs and secret missions. I had no idea what to expect, whether anything could be done about the secret missions difficulty, but nonetheless, I got them all. Oh, and this also hinders the S ranking experience. Normally, when it comes to S ranking things in a level based game, you probably do all the ones you know wouldn't give you too much trouble at first, and then carry on from there. You know, pick and choose your battles. Pace yourself. Unfortunately, that's not a luxury with DMC 1, since you can't pick any levels at all. If you get to the results screen and don't see what you like, you have to start from the beginning all over again, and can't move on until you get it just right. Now, The key to getting those S ranks is to usually be fast as hell, at least the guides I read on normal mode. And it also kinda leaves combat off the table, which is quite a shame for a game like Devil May Cry. And I guess I get why that might be the case, since a lot of the game's missions is just getting the object from point A to point B, given the fact, again, that it started off as a RE4 prototype. It makes sense to still resemble some of that series' game design. I actually have a funny story about a secret mission. So this happened on mission 4, you know, the lava spider fight one. The secret mission of this game spawns after the fight, and whenever you fail a secret mission, by the way, it's gone. You have to reload the latest save before you messed up and try again. I think you can see where I'm going with this. I have no idea how many friggin' times it took for me to get that damn orb fragment. I'm sure it would have been that hard on normal, but because of the really questionable choices they made and difficulty, it made the experience a pain in the ass. So, yeah, this harms DMC1 because these kind of games, 6-hour-long linear campaigns, depend on replayability, and what can make the next playthrough different, maybe besides the difficulty, is getting out the collectibles. But then the gateways I just mentioned can kind of spoil the fun, causing people to be kinda iffy on replaying the whole game. Now, what does the average Devil May Cry 1 level consist of? Well, again, it's a linear game where sections are divided by levels. In DMC1, there are 23 normal missions and 12 secret missions. You find the secret missions in certain spots of its respective level. Again, they spawn in specific missions, and because this originated as an RE4 prototype, its missions have an RE-esque vibe. Get the thing to the thing, or beat up the boss to get the thing. A mechanic unique to DMC is the Devil Trigger. When Dante's Devil Trigger gets at least 3 bars filled, DT is activated, which slowly regenerates health and gives Dante a buff. If activated during Alistair, Dante can fly. If it's activated during Ifrit, you can shoot crazy ass fireballs. You gain DT by landing hits on the enemy, and something else that can help fill out the DT bar and spice up the overall combat and give the game an identity is taunting. Now, taunting can give you a sliver at DT, and you can exploit the hell out of this if you find a safe place to taunt and fill up enough for your DT. The ranking system is mainly due to damage taken, red orbs collected, and time. Obviously, the more damage and time taken, along with the lack of red orbs, the less the rank will be. And because of this, some of the strategies I've seen is to obtain these ranks are to just speedrun the hell out of these levels. Again, combat is a factor in as much, just don't get hit too much. Meaning, combat has to be actively avoided sometimes. Thankfully, the later games like Devil May Cry 5 have removed factors like time and damage taking has been mixed alongside with style ranking. Now, what else is on the agenda list? Oh, right. We can go back to the characters. So the next substantial thing done with Dante is that he finds out about Trish's whole deal and lets her off. But not without letting her know how much he dislikes her. And this is the only time we see Dante royally pissed off like this in the whole game. He didn't even raise his voice when fighting Mundus, and still finished it off with a quip. I feel like this just humanizes Dante. He has things that makes him tick, and goes to show that at the end of the day, he loves his family, and more than anything, wants them back. It paints a picture that he's more than what he seems without straight up saying it. The whole wisecracking, fearless, kick-ass demon hunter is just a tip of the iceberg of who Dante is, and later installments are run with this. It really flourishes in DMC 3 and the games following after. This conveys the potential this series has with its characters. Sure, the story itself is pretty basic, with Trish telling Dante that something up at Malay Island and using her looks, reminiscing of his mother, Dante decides to play ball and check it out himself. Later down the line, Dante comes across Nilo Angelo and Dante becomes very suspicious of him. After that, Dante finds out the truth about Trish, that she's a demon clone of Dante's mother to lure him to Malay Island, that Mundus can kill the last remaining Sparta family member so that no one can stand in his way and finally take over the world. And to add salt to the wound, Dante finds out that Nilo Angelo is actually his brother, Virgil, being puppeteered by Mundus and sent out to kill Dante. Dante finds this out after the last battle with Nilo Angelo, because when Angelo is finally defeated, he ends up dropping an amulet, the same one Dante knew Virgil had. After Mundus is defeated, Trish then breaks free out of Mundus' control and feels bad for what she did. Dante decides to save her as well, and escape the island as it falls apart due to Mundus being defeated. As they escape, Trish comes to appreciate humanity, and Dante tells her there's plenty more where that came from, in the human world. As they escape, the game then ends Dante with the duo being buddy-buddy and go off to kick demon ass in the name of Devil May Cry. So, yeah, simple. See, again, Dante for the most part is suave. Usually doesn't get loud or bash. Trish, unfortunately, doesn't have much going on for her. But I do like the idea of what's trying to be done with Trish. Again, she sort of acts as a person to make sure Dante is going along with the plot. Which, yeah, in universe, that is her purpose. But what grabs my attention the most is when she starts to break free of control and seems to feel remorse. Throughout this whole game, we're taught that demons are self-serving assholes who only strive for death and destruction. At least the demons spawned by Mundus. And yet here's Trish, spawned by Mundus, feeling bad for causing Dante trouble and completely understands how her mere presence could cause distress for Dante. And yet, they somehow make up. When Trish exclaims how cool the sky is, Dante is like, hell yeah it is.
The sky, so clear, so blue.
The sky is fair. It'll always be above everyone's head, no different.
And that ending line where Trish reinforces that they're a duo, she seemed excited to help. Pretty wholesome. You know, despite the fact they're gonna go commit demon murder, but yeah. She seemed so excited to help. And then she didn't appear for 3 games, and even when she did, her actual screen time was minimal and characterization was completely different, and yes, I know the shift in direction behind the scenes not only affected her, but other stuff in general. Yeah. Also, again, something from the EGM issue from earlier, the director stated that he had interest in having Trish as a playable character in DMC1, but couldn't due to time restraints. He saw potential in her as a character, both in terms of writing and gameplay. He even stated that he could totally see her being the lead of a Devil May Cry game. I feel like this conveys that Trish's potential has been something desired since the series' inception. And I agreed. I mean, overall, Trish was pretty cool to play as in Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, alongside Lady. At this point, bring Lady in the mix as well. Hell, maybe even throw in a new Demon Hunter Galpao for them. And I'll be going on a small tangent. Point is, Devil May Cry can totally be more than the Sparta family. I'm not saying throw the whole family away, but I just want the series to expand the scope. I may not know game development. I know it's not for any of the things that aren't immediately super AAA successes that appeals to everyone, which is why it was a shock Devil May Cry 5 worked and did well as it did. Anyways, back to the topic. Despite everything, both the main 2 takes on Devil May Cry still line up with each other. Dante's so funny on purpose and annoying to his enemies. He still knows he must prioritize his humanity, which separates him from the other demon. He has to keep fighting to protect the world his father risked his life for, not just because his dad did, but because Dante himself appreciates the human world. And I believe that because of the plane scene where he seems so excited and sharing the joys of humanity with someone else for once. I feel like Devil May Cry 3 built off this Dante by giving him more of a reason of his own on why he wants to protect humanity. For humans out there like Ava or Lady. At the end of the day, I still think Devil May Cry 1 is still worth overall playing and remembering. Oh, and special thanks to the wikis and archives I used, as well as the people who provided some footage that I used. Thanks for watching. Take care.